What's up, Pod Pals? It's your buddy Adam, and this is Podcasting and Business School, the show where I teach podcasters how to love their podcast like a hobby and build it like a business. Today, we're doing a podcast audit with my new Pod Pal, Lauren, from the Women of Web3 podcast. Lauren, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Amazing. I am good, thank you. How are you doing?
I am very excited. I'm always excited to get a hold of new Pod Pals to kind of dig in and see if I can add a little bit of value today. So let's get this show cranking here. I want to set a goal. If we were looking 6 months out in the future and you and I were to meet up and you're like, oh, everything's going really, really well. We've got a lot of momentum right now. Between now and then, what would need to happen for that to be true?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So in 6 months' time, I would love to have at least doubled listeners, or maybe approximately doubled listeners in that time. In a year's time, I would love to have well beyond doubled listeners per episode. But thinking about how to get there, I'd also love to see sort of big name sponsors sponsoring the show. We're starting to get towards that direction, but I think we're not really quite playing at that level yet. And what we need to do to get there is, I think it hasn't got that that shareability yet. I think people kind of know what it's about, and I think people find it useful in terms of demystifying this area of tech, which so Web 3.0, all things metaverse, blockchain, etc., and making sense of it. It makes sense to people as a concept, but I think it needs to be a bit more like, yes, I need to have a reason to go and listen and go and share it with other people.
Okay. And what do you feel like is holding you back from that right now? Do you feel like it's like some people are like, I just don't know how to do social media marketing, or some people are like, I don't understand how podcast growth even works. Do you feel like any of those are factoring in?
I think there's a couple of things going on. One is that we're potentially trying to be everything to everyone, which is that we're trying to speak to absolute beginners in this quite high-tech area. So we're trying to sort of make things make sense to them while also bringing intermediate learners along the journey and not patronizing them with like sort of breaking down jargon of like, what does NFT mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? So slightly trying to be everything to everyone. I think the other thing is, I'm sure we'll end up sort of chatting more about this, is thinking about the sort of ideal customer piece. Is that when I think about ideal customer, what I've actually been picturing is our community. And that's like everyone that potentially listens to the show and everyone that comes to our events, things like that. And actually, they're not necessarily the paying customers.
Okay. All right, cool. So I think I've got enough to be dangerous here to be able to help you out a little bit. I've looked at your RSS feed on Apple Podcast, and I like the name of the show. I feel like one of my main filters that I run every show name through is what's it about and who is it for? And I feel like the Women of Web3, we can check that box. And your description looks good too. You've got lots of good keywords in there. One thing that I think would pull a lot of the right people into your world, and you wouldn't even have to change and necessarily put it on your show art, but a little bit of a podcast title extension where like my show is, everywhere I have it branded just Podcasting Business School, but inside of my host, it's Podcasting Business School tips for coaches, online consultants, and service providers. Like I have that extension in there with all those keywords. And I think if you had something like conversations on blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFT, like all those words are so searchable right now. I think you're going to see a surge of the right people finding your show. So, I mean, I think and you wouldn't have to add it to your art. You don't have to add it to your branding anywhere if you don't want to. Just add to the title line of your podcast inside of your host, conversations about, and list like two, three, four of those words that I know people are searching NFTs. I've searched that. I know people will search blockchain or Bitcoin or whatever, like those big terms. Put a few of those in there. I think metaverse, like that's going to really help. So any questions or thoughts about that?
This is all making sense. To be honest, I'd actually already made some changes to the main description of the podcast based on listening to your podcast. I was doing a little bit of keyword stuffing, or like I changed one bit, so it now says, and if you're wondering what can AI do for me, or what can ChatGPT do for me, I think one of those two, because I'm hoping that's what people might actually be searching.
You did a really nice job with the keywords in your host description. So I think just a slight little addition to that title and the title line. It's going to be like you're kind of fishing in multiple waters and on multiple ponds. And I think it's going to really help. So that would be one quick growth idea that I'm very confident that will work, because this space, I often say it, I was like, if I had to launch a third brand, like I used to have a health brand, then I went to the business brand. If I had to go outside of the business and go somewhere else, and I was like, if I was just trying to get the biggest show as fast as possible, it would be a cryptocurrency show, because it's like so many people are so hungry to learn and just figure this out. We feel all the FOMO, all the fear of missing out. We feel all this, like there's all this excitement. It goes way up and then it goes down, and then the metaverse and what is Web3 and what are NFTs. So there's so much buzz around it. I think that you're in the right spot. So congrats on that. And so one idea that really hit me when you're talking about having your audience is kind of two pronged. It's a little bit divided amongst the beginners and the kind of the intermediate. And I guess the nice thing about crypto is like it's still so new. Intermediate people are kind of like almost experts. It's like, if you've been in this thing for 5 years, my God, like you're a legend. Like this is you're an absolute pro at this thing. So what I would do, especially if you're trying to build memberships, I would look at, I've got a technique that I call workshop weeks, where you can do like a mini deep dive on a beginner topic. So it could be like Web3 back to basics, and we're talking all things blockchain. And you do, what I would do is like 5 episodes Monday through Friday, just short episodes, like a little 10-minute basics, back to basics, blockchain basics, whatever, and just have it for beginners. And that way you kind of get them up to speed on a major topic. But then what I would do if I have a membership where you probably go a lot deeper on that sort of a topic, and if you like this, you are an ideal candidate for our blah, blah, blah membership, where we go even deeper with this, and we can work with you hands-on as you're making, investment decisions or Web3 build out decision or whatever. So it's almost like a lead magnet directly into. So I would sponsor those episodes with like a discovery call or something that gets them in, or a free trial of your membership, or a discount on their first month of your membership or something like that. I think that could be a pretty effective funnel. And it's a nice little, you do a deep dive maybe once per quarter like that. So about every 90 days, do a workshop week, back to basics, deep dive on a topic, funnel it into your membership. I think that would be pretty effective, and it's going to be good content. And that way your newbies kind of feel taken care of. And you could even curate some like Spotify playlists or something where you're like, all of our back to basics episode series, in order or whatever. So I think you could do some pretty unique stuff with that. So how's that hitting you? Any ideas popping up there?
Yes. The thing I'm still struggling with is I've been trying to make sure, in an ideal world, women of Web3 wouldn't charge people, so wouldn't do like a paid for membership. I mean, that's a different model to how others are doing it. So like, if I wanted to just straight up make money, I would just monetize a membership. Great. But because of the sort of ethos of women of Web3 as a broader community, it's about, if Web 3.0 is meant to be a more like democratized internet that's for everybody, like owned by everybody. So I'm like, okay, well, if we want to talk about sort of democratization and accessibility, let's actually make all this stuff for free for the community. So it has, like, the whole way along, it's been a little bit tricky to monetize, but actually we can do that through things like brand partnerships, or like people sponsoring the podcast, brands coming and partnering on events, and we curate panels of speakers for their events, things like that. So there are ways to monetize, and I'm realizing that actually maybe they're the clients I need to be sort of trying to speak to. So there are a niche within my niche of listeners.
Yeah.
But they exist. And so it's just kind of, maybe we need to do more to kind of explain how we can partner, and therefore that kind of sales funnel. Because I think I was wrongly thinking I need to get my community into sort of general sales funnel, but actually I haven't got a paid for product that sits at the end of that. So,
yeah. Well, if you get a free community, that's even easier, where if you were to do these kind of deep dive workshop week curated content, funnel them, hey, we can go further into the conversation in our free community over here on Discord or Facebook or whatever, and just funnel people into that. And then I think there are great brand partner. I like to use the language brand immersion partners instead of sponsors, because that as podcasters, we have been stuck in this, what's called CPM, model cost per mil, that one person invented, John Lee Dumas from the Entrepreneur on Fire. He just made up, podcasters should get paid between $18 and $25 US for every 1,000 downloads. He just made this up. And it's great when you're doing 500,000 downloads an episode. But if you're doing 500 downloads an episode, you can't even get paid $18 by a sponsor now. So getting out of the term podcast sponsorship and do brand immersion, where we go, hey, our brand immersion partners will gain exposure on our podcast with audio ads, on our social media, and in our email list or newsletter, or in our Facebook community or Discord or whatever. So use that language, but inviting brand immersion partners to speak to your free community. And maybe, I mean, you can do this as often as you want. It's a great value add for your community, but this is a relationship builder of you. These are affiliate opportunities. These are, you know, down the road, you do an event. Hey, would you like to be a paid sponsor for this? Would you like to be a paid sponsor for the show? I feel like that's going to allow you to build relationships. And I don't think, I mean, you've got a show called Women of Web3. You've got a free community of however many people that are there. They're in the Web3 space, or they have a program, product, or service that they would like to sell to people that are interested in that. I don't see anyone saying no. And then maybe you go, well, let's get you on the show. And then, so you can have kind of a multi-tiered relationship building process where you get them on the show. Maybe they do a newsletter write-up, they speak to your free community. And maybe the first time they go through that, it's free. Maybe the next time it's as a brand immersion partner. I don't know, but I think that, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's making me think I definitely need to revisit what that looks like, because I think we've been someone's a bit too eager to do something maybe bespoke for people, and we just kind of like throw everything at them of like, we'll just work with you in any way that you want. And actually,
Right.
we could better productize of like, you know, here's how we typically do it is like, you know, work with us on the podcast like this, work with us on the newsletter like this. And yeah, productize that offering rather than just sort of saying, yeah, sure, let's like work with you however, because we're desperate, which is how you come across.
Exactly. So what I would do, Lauren, is I would look at the potential brand immersion partner and then kind of get in their shoes and think, what is the best entry point of exposure for them to my audience that I can provide for free that they would be excited about? Is it come on my show? Is it speak in front of my free membership? Is it let's do a social media collab? I don't know, but that's something that you'll get better and better at figuring out. And then you make that as the invite, and we come on. You got a great, that way you can feel them out. Maybe it's a podcast interview or a live on social media, Instagram or something like that. You get to create a little content together. You get to, you know, kind of get a feel for them. They get a feel for you. And then, you know, you can say, well, I'd really love to go live with you on Instagram, or have you come in and speak at our free community. Here's how that would work. And I would just try to collect multiple connection points, but then have that set exposed brand immersion package. I just did a VIP day with one of my clients. They came into town to work with me for a few hours, and we mapped this out for him, where we had 3 different levels and 3 different price points. And it was like, in level 1, here's what you're going to get. Here's how many audio exposures you're going to get on our show. Here's how many email blasts you're going to get. Here's how many social media assets we're going to do with like Instagram Reels or TikTok videos or whatever. And obviously the amount changes with each level. But I usually recommend a 2 to 3 tier option so they can look at it and price it accordingly. Like a lot of these people are used to doing radio ads and things like that. I think in your space, they're probably not so much with Web3. Like they're a little bit more like, you know, advanced, and they realize that doing like radio ads and things like that it's kind of ridiculous this day and age. But I think they will be very eager to get podcast exposure and social media exposure and anything with your email list. So yeah, so I think that would be a pretty good starting point. Do you feel like you'd be able to throw together a 2 to 3 tier kind of set option package list?
I think so, yes. The part I'm nervous about when you're talking about this is almost like sort of guaranteeing numbers, because we're not an enormous community and like not an enormous listenership, but it definitely does seem to speak to brands. So there's something about it, something about what we're creating. I think also because this whole area of tech is like really overwhelming, and we're seen as the kind of friendly face, the kind of partner in the space, the bridge towards this this high tech area,
Yeah.
and people seem to really speak to people. So yeah, we haven't always got the numbers, but there's something in it that sort of captured the zeitgeist that seems to speak to
Yeah.
people.
Well, and there's something behind that of value where sponsors that really understand how this works, they'll be like, wow, if I can get in front of like an example would be like, let's say you had a podcast for mothers of like twins and triplets, and you wanted Pampers to be a sponsor, and they see that you're doing 400 downloads an episode, and they're like, 400 downloads an episode, that's 800 to 1200 little bottoms that need diapers that we could be selling to there, and like that's great exposure. Or they could run some general ad and it goes to everybody. So you've got a very niche down audience that's interested in very specific things. So it's targeted marketing. Like they aren't having to spend and try to decode Facebook ad algorithms or anything to get this target market. You just have it. Here it is. It's on a platter. This is exactly what they're interested in. They're not interested in, health and fitness products and whatever. It's like, this is what they're interested in. This is what they came here for. So if you have that type of a service, there's a great connection point for you there. So, and then you want to look at with your brand. This is why I emphasize so much on my show, like email list building, social media building. If you want to get brand partners, brand immersion partners, sponsors, whatever you want to call them, it helps so much if you have that three-pronged approach, like that. It's like a three-legged stool to stand your package up on, where it's like, okay, not only are you getting the audio of X amount of downloads per episode, we're doing, and a lot of people honestly aren't even super stressed out about the download numbers. A lot of people don't even know what it means, and like, we're not trying to rip people off and be shady about it, but you're like, hey, we do, 125 downloads per episode. That's top 50% of all podcasts, which is absolutely true. And then we've got 1,000-person email list, and we've got 1,400 people on our Instagram. That's what you're gaining exposure to. But the good news is, as we grow and more people get in front of this, your ad will always be in that episode, or like it is evergreen. It is always there. It's not like booking something on the radio where you hope that the right person is listening at the right moment. I have bingeable content. People will be going back through my back catalog, listening years from now, months from now, whatever, and your ad will always be there. So as we grow, you gain more exposure, and it's there and there and there always. And that's very attractive. Does that make sense?
It does. I did actually try that just as a random one-off. I just put that on my LinkedIn, just put a screenshot of like, here are the top 5 most listened to episodes. And they had really SEO-able titles of like, what is an NFT and what can you do with it? What is the blockchain? What's it for? Or something like that. And I said, these are the most listened to episodes. Like, who wants them, basically? And it gained some interest. It didn't actually lead to people buying ads on it, but actually, yeah, that was literally just like a one-off test. And maybe I should actually go out to market with that properly.
Yeah. And another thing you could do, I've got another client that's in my membership, the Download Growth Club, that is in a really niche down segment of the architecture area, and like construction, architecture, engineering. And she does marketing for those types of businesses. And she got a sponsor, and I helped her create a package where they got to do, so that like little mini workshop series that I was talking about, they got to kind of co-create one with her, and they were the official sponsor of that 3 or 5 episode series, but they were kind of co-hosting it with her. So if you have a brand immersion partner that has a very specific product for Web3, for NFTs or whatever, you could bring them on and do a series of shows that all get released as a mini series, workshop, whatever. And they're there with you. It's like multiple interviews or co-hosting, doing discussions, and it's all about that topic, and it's sponsored by their program, product, or service. And that's of high value, because again, that is always there, and that's unique content. So something like that, I mean, that might be, it's great content for your audience too. And you're going to ramp up downloads because you're doing more episodes, which is awesome. And everybody loves that. So I think something like that, you could even, it's unique in the space. You may even want to lead with that and be like, hey, this is one of the options of our 3, It's a workshop series that's sponsored by you. We do 3 interviews or 5 interviews, and we break it up into a workshop-based style content on the show, and it'll air Monday through Friday during this one targeted week that they get to pick which week that goes. So what do you think about that?
I like it. I know that you've also got your own mini series, which I've just started listening to. And I was wondering, would you recommend that people do it as like a separate? Basically, yeah. Should the mini series of any kind be released as like on your main podcast, or as a totally new thing that has its own RSS feed, etc.?
Okay, great question. So with a limited series podcast, so mine is called Podcast Monetization Tips. That's 21 episodes, but it acts for me and for my business like a funnel to get new clients. So if you don't have a program, product, or service that you are personally selling, I wouldn't do one of those. I would put this type of content inside of your main show. As especially if you're doing it with a business partner that's paying for exposure, they want exposure to that audience. Otherwise, you'd have to build a whole new audience fresh from the start. So it would make more sense to have this type of what we're talking about as a part of your main brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I think if we were kind of, I don't know, if I was like famous, you could be like, now go and listen to my separate mini series.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, exactly.
Not quite
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're a famous comedian like Will Ferrell or Kevin Hart or somebody that's like, yeah, let's do as many as we want, people will always show up, just slap your face on there, and it does 1 million downloads. But not me. That's not how it works for me. Cool. Well, Lauren, I think we got a good foothold here on making some progress. And I think that a few little tweaks, and like I said, you're in a great space to be in, very hot in every aspect as far as like potential growth and all that. But I think Web3 crypto based podcasts are really going to take off, especially as like the next Bitcoin halving starts to happen and all this stuff. Like I really am excited about it. So I will be following closely, and I want to make sure that you get to shout out your website, social media, all that stuff. So go ahead and take the floor.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you for having me. Our website is womenofweb3.co, and our social handles are at womenofweb3co. A good place actually to come and find us is come and find us on LinkedIn. I'm finding that as a really good growth channel. So come and find Women of Web3 or me. I'm Lauren Ingram.
Outstanding. All right. And all you out there listening in, if you want to be just like my pod pal Lauren and come on for a podcast audit, I invite you, come on in, head on over to the main website, www.podcastingbusiness.school. Grab a spot on the calendar and I'll see you on the show. All right, everybody. Appreciate you for tuning in today. And as always, I'm going to send you off into the world, wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. We'll see you next time.